Good morning. Time for another edition of my podcast. It's Tuesday after Memorial Day and the Memorial Day weekend. Coming to do some thinking. And one of these things is the idea of, brave men, fighting men, and how we admire them. And also just the notion of fighters in general. I recently got a chance to see a movie called The Fighter about the life of Lowell boxer actually, Mickey Ward. Also, his half-brother's influence in his life, Dickie Eklund. And as I watched this movie, which was a really well-done, gritty movie about the boxing world and just what it takes to become a professional boxer and what goes into that, it got me to thinking about this notion of what we admire. And just as we admire those men who are willing and courageous enough to lay down their lives to protect us, we also admire people who basically have started with nothing. Mickey Ward lived in a very tough town of Lowell, Massachusetts. The people there are very, gritty. Education is not a priority. It's a very blue-collar town existence, and people there in many ways feel like they're trapped. They're trapped in their own existence, and they'd like to get out of it. They'd like to actually be somebody. And in the case of Mickey Ward, he through a lot of adversity, a lot of difficulties, he rose to become a welterweight, or I don't know, the light welterweight champion of the world, one of those boxing classes, champion of the world. And the movie is well done, and the ending is fantastic as you cheer the last fight when he wins, and the camera pans after the victory, and you just get a feeling of his mom and his dad and all the people of the town of Lowell as they watch on TV, all feeling all of a sudden that they've become somebody. Something great has happened. They have now somehow earned redemption, actually, in many ways. The town of Lowell is now on the map. Maybe they don't consider themselves such losers anymore. Because actually, Mickey Ward was one of them. And certainly Mickey Ward and his half-brother, whose life could be characterized as, less than admirable in many ways, now have seemed to have made it. And later on, as the movie gives its credits, it talks about Dickie Eklund, who had one time been a crack addict and really had messed up his life, is now a trainer of boxers, and he's a local legend in Lowell. And Mickey Ward, of course, can do public appearances, motivational speakers, because he actually became a boxing champion. What this movie reminded me of, and what I'd like to speak about today, is this idea that we can gain a lot of comfort in this life by things, and by doing things, and by achievement. I know if you hear of an underdog story and somebody through hard work, perseverance, dedication, climbs out from a very tough, humble beginnings and ends up making a life for himself, and in many ways bettering himself through various means, we take that as a triumph. And in this life, it certainly is. There's no way anybody can be convinced that if you live in a life where you have to squander for everything, and everything around you is the clear evidences of a broken world, of sin, poverty, lack of an education, somebody's able to rise above that and find the better things of life, there's no reason why that person on many levels wouldn't be happy, because we can get a great degree of happiness in this life, in comfort, just by rising above it. And that's what a fighter does, because hopefully we have an instinct in us to fight for things that we think are better. But with this desire to fight and to achieve and to better our lives comes a place of a very dangerous peril. That being that, those of us who know and have a relationship with God and know God, know that God has a standard for humankind, and a standard of humankind that is very sobering, because God is a jealous God. God desires from his creatures that they honor and worship him in all that we do. Now, in the case of the movie, The case of those people of Lowell, the cases of Mickey Ward and his brother Dickie. Um, Although in many ways, they were people we can identify with. In many ways, we're like them. We know from watching them that they were people who God was secondary. Their circumstances, their narcissism, all the things that consume them were not of God. They were consumed with other things. And God was but an afterthought, maybe a rabbit's foot, what have you, to get them through tough times. But God was not the focal point, and it was evident in their life through whatever ways they did live. Numerous sins. And we too, we all sin. All of us who've ever been born sin. We have issues, we have character flaws, all these things that are part of a sinful condition that we were left in after the fall of Adam. And because of this, we are alienated, strangers to a relationship with God, who's a God of holiness, a God of perfect righteousness, a God who is storing up wrath for creatures who basically have, rebelled against him in the most profound way, and says, I will not follow God. I will be the captain of my own ship, even if I'm losing. And some of the ways we decide to be captain of our own ship is by bettering ourselves, by achieving, by gaining redemption through things like being a fighter, by a rags to riches story, going from, a rough town of Lowell to being a champion, a somebody. We all want to be a somebody. We want to be a contender. And that manifests itself in a lot of ways. How many of those World War II veterans, or the people who've gone to Iraq, whatever, basically their motive was, I failed in a lot of areas. I'm going to better myself. I'm going to, serve my country. I'm going to make my mom and dad proud. I want to go back to my town and be some sort of a hero. And we admire that because they did, in many ways, show a lot of bravery in taking up the call. And in many ways, we admire people at any level if they better their life through going to college, through working hard, getting a promotion, not being fearful, just by saying, taking a risk. Like, somebody who said, I'm stuck in this job, but I'm going to go out, venture out, and do something better on myself. And despite all obstacles, they succeed. The question is this redemption? In many ways, we think our redemption is based upon a thing that, if it's admirable and we all agree that it's good, is that acceptable to God? Is that going to be a ticket to heaven? And I'm thinking how we, in so many ways, as we cheer the triumph of athletes, war heroes, everybody who has an admirable story, we take comfort in that because, we're glad to see them, move past the great difficulties of life that many of us suffer from. And if they can somehow escape that, move on to better things, we say, good for them. But really, is that condition going to help them? Or is it actually maybe increase their peril? Because those who know they're a screw up, they've messed up, in some level, they can really know, where do I go? I've messed up. And that's the opportunity for them to cling or to flee to the cross of Jesus Christ, because human beings, apart from Christ, are alienated from the promises of God. They're children of the devil, and they have no hope in this life. And they have even less a hope in the life to come. Their life will be alienated from God. Yet their losing condition, their apparent, obvious failures, and their clear sins make it such that, the gospel, the invitation to love God, is very evident, and God can draw them in various ways. However, when we look at people and we see them blossom, so to speak, and they're able to, in many ways, bury their sins in the sand because their victories become so much evident to those around them and to the greater world at large, that they're able to think, I've made it. And this is my redemption on earth, and now I become something, and maybe that's my meal ticket. And God knows, after all, I've worked hard for these things, and maybe in some capacity, I'll do better things to please God. But those who've been redeemed by God realize that we don't escape the sins and the boundaries to make a better life for ourselves and to show our neighbors and our friends that we made it. No, it's where we go to flee, to find refuge and desire and love God every day. Our knowledge of the depths of our sin, the depths of our depravity, the depths of our failures, as we are there, that's where we can really know how much we want to become consumed with the knowledge of the holy, consumed with the knowledge of the Lordship of Christ, of the depths of God's grace and mercy. It's only when we really recognize how weak, feeble, ineffective, flawed, sinful we are, that those things are made manifest in their most promising, most fulfilling ways of how we really desire and want to be with God. While we're caught up in the moment of, our successes and how we made it from point A to point B and how now we're admired, those things become less clear. Because in many ways, we have become success stories. And by becoming a success story, aren't we like a small God in many ways? After all, we know there are a lot of non-success stories, a lot of failures. We see them every day. And when we become a success and differentiate ourselves from our failures, in many ways, God becomes less important. And that was my lament about the movie The Fighter. Then in many ways, after it was over, I wondered, if this is helpful to the Ward family, the town of Lowell, Mickey Ward himself. I don't know what his Christian condition is now, if he follows God, but I do know at some level he's made it. He's taken comfort in that. And even as I watched the movie, I felt in some level glad for him. Yet, is it better for him? Is the idea that redemption we have so many opportunities to gain some sort of redemption outside of Christ is a frightening thing, because the only true redemption comes through a repentance of our sin, an acknowledgement that God has not been first in our lives, not by a long shot, in a continual, day by day, moment by moment, clinging to the cross of Calvary, knowing that it is by God and Him alone that we feel satisfaction. Our only comfort in life and in death comes through knowing Christ. And our desire, our fulfillment should only be in Him. And all other things are byproducts of God's blessing us. My thoughts. Thank you. Until next time, Johnny W. Bread. I'm out.